What happens when the currency of a once debt-ridden African nation begins to rise spectacularly, beating even the US dollar? What happens when a country known more for IMF bailouts than fiscal miracles suddenly becomes the envy of emerging markets? You would expect applause. You would expect economic institutions to fly in and praise the country's turnaround, maybe even a congratulatory call from Washington. But that's not what happened to Ghana. Instead, the global financial system began to shudder. The same IMF that once held Ghana by the throat with austerity and debt conditions now accuses the nation of manipulating its success. Accusations, warnings, and veiled threats, the tone changed overnight. Because Ghana did the unthinkable, it rose without permission. The Cedi, Ghana's currency, has appreciated by over 42% against the US dollar in 2025 alone. Once the world's worst-performing currency, it is now the best-performing currency on Earth. And that's exactly why the system is panicking. So the question is no longer just, how did Ghana do it? The real question is, why does the IMF want it stopped? In this video, let's find out. Ghana's Cedi is not just appreciating, it's turning the tables. As 2025 began, the Cedi was trading at a battered 15 cedis to the US dollar, the aftermath of years of economic turmoil, currency devaluation, and IMF-induced austerity. Few imagined it would surge ahead by over 42%, breaking through the 10 cedi barrier by mid-year and becoming the world's best-performing currency. While most currencies across Africa and the global south struggled against a relatively volatile dollar, Ghana's Cedi did the unimaginable. It defied gravity. But currencies don't just rise for fun. Something fundamental had shifted. This was not a fluke or market accident. It was the result of deliberate political and economic defiance. And at the center of this defiance stood President John Mahama, who returned to power in late 2024 with a mandate to heal the economy from IMF suffocation and restore dignity to a bruised nation. And instead of tightening his grip on IMF rules, Mahama did the opposite. He shredded them. He repealed punitive taxes on mobile money transfers, vehicle insurance, and other burdens that had crushed small businesses and working-class citizens. He revived public confidence by ending the cycle of IMF first, citizens last. And it worked. Inflation fell sharply, from crisis levels to 21.2% by April 2025. The cost of goods dropped, foreign reserves swelled past $11 billion, and local investors started returning their capital to Ghana. All of this sparked a historic turnaround in currency strength. But while Ghanaians celebrated, the IMF frowned. The IMF, which claims to stabilize economies and promote development, didn't applaud Ghana's stunning rebound. Instead, it warned. It raised doubts about how the Cedi was gaining so rapidly. It suggested the Bank of Ghana may be interfering with or supporting the currency artificially. Why? Because what Ghana had done was deeply symbolic and dangerous for the system the IMF upholds. For decades, African nations were told they could not function without Western supervision. The IMF was always positioned as the benevolent overseer, providing structure and discipline. But Ghana just tore up the rulebook and won. And that, more than anything, triggered panic. The Bank of Ghana clarified, no artificial interventions were being made. The strength came from tight monetary policy, gold-backed reserves, and clean FX auctions. But the IMF doubled down. It still claimed Ghana's surge was overheated and might cause future damage. Translation? Get back in line. Don't inspire rebellion, but it was too late. Across Africa, others were already watching. Nigeria is investing in local manufacturing. South Africa is exploring trade outside the US dollar. The African Continental Free Trade Area is expanding. Ghana's example became a blueprint, a real-time demonstration that Africa can chart its own course. And for the IMF, that's the real threat. Years before this showdown, Dr. Arikana Chihombori Kwao, a Zimbabwean doctor and former African Union ambassador to the US, warned the world. She said the IMF and World Bank were never designed to help Africa succeed, but to keep Africa failing, just enough to stay dependent. These institutions don't collapse when Africa fails. They thrive. They use failure to justify more loans, more conditions, more supervision. They succeed when we fail, she declared. Their survival depends on us never rising. Her words were so unsettling that she was swiftly removed from her AU post. Critics said she was too radical. But Ghana's recent history shows that she wasn't exaggerating. She was right. Ghana's economic rise wasn't met with global applause. It was met with global suspicion. The more successful Ghana became, the more uncomfortable the IMF grew. Their warnings, their language, and their tone all changed the moment Ghana's trajectory no longer followed their roadmap. Dr. Arikana's truth has returned, and this time, it's backed by results. To truly grasp what Ghana escaped, we need only to look at Egypt. In 2024, Egypt struck an $8 billion loan agreement with the IMF. In return, they were told to float their currency, slash fuel and electricity subsidies, and open their economy even further to market forces. They followed every condition. No resistance, no rebellion. And what happened? Inflation exploded. Bread prices tripled. The Egyptian pound lost 50% of its value. The population was thrown into despair. Poverty surged. Mass protests erupted. Citizens blamed the government for surrendering their economy to foreign interests. Even President El-Sisi, known for his authoritarian grip, began hinting at breaking away from IMF guidance. Yet the IMF praised Egypt. Why? Because failure with obedience is preferable to success with defiance. This is the twisted logic Ghana refused to obey. And it's why Ghana is being treated like a troublemaker, while Egypt, a financial disaster, is considered a model partner. Now, let's stop pretending the IMF is about economics. Its real power isn't in advice, it's in debt. Ghana's 2023 bailout came with all the classic IMF demands: tax hikes on mobile money, lottery wins, and even car insurance. Treasury bills were slashed to unsustainable levels. Public spending was squeezed so tightly that education and healthcare suffered. It didn't stabilize Ghana, it strangled it. Then came Mahama. He repealed those taxes. He restored spending. And within 5 months, Ghana's debt dropped by 150 billion cedis. Gold reserves tripled. Foreign exchange reserves soared. Imports became affordable again. The IMF called it distortion, but it wasn't distortion. It was freedom. And therein lies the IMF's real fear. Not that Ghana's policies won't work, but that they will. Because if Ghana thrives without IMF oversight, what's to stop every other African nation from walking away too? That's the kind of independence the IMF was designed to prevent, not encourage. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. Let's not make the mistake of thinking this is just about a currency. Ghana's Cedi didn't just gain value. It cracked open a system that was never supposed to be challenged. The success of the Cedi is now being watched not just by economists, but by policymakers across the global south. Because if Ghana, once deep in debt and under IMF control, can now outperform every emerging market currency, what excuse do others have to remain shackled? The real story here isn't monetary. It's philosophical. It's about African economic freedom, a vision that has long been ridiculed, suppressed, and dismissed as naive. For years, African nations have been told they are too weak, too disorganized, too poor to stand on their own feet. But Ghana has just punched a hole through that narrative. The very institutions that claim to build Africa up are now scrambling to discredit one of its biggest economic wins. And that's the root of the IMF's panic. It isn't just about one country. It's about what happens when one country becomes a symbol. Ghana has now become a precedent, a model, a threat. Because if Ghana's people can rise by rejecting IMF blueprints, then why can't Nigeria? Why can't Senegal or Zambia or Malawi? If this story spreads, and it will, the entire system that has kept Africa dependent for generations begins to crumble. The IMF knows this. That's why it isn't just watching, it's intervening. Soft threats, economic forecasts laced with doom, allegations of currency manipulation. But Ghana's message is already out. The idea has been planted, and its roots are growing fast, from Lagos to Lusaka, from Nairobi to Niamey. This is the moment the IMF fears most, when one victory becomes a wildfire. Because if they don't regain control now, they might never again. However, Ghana's currency surge is not just a market rally, it's a revolution. It marks the beginning of a new era where African nations don't just survive IMF conditions, they reject them and thrive. This isn't about short-term inflation rates or currency forecasts. It's about a continent daring to take control of its destiny after decades of being dictated to. The lesson is clear. Africa does not need the IMF to succeed. It never did. It needed courage, leadership, and policies rooted in the realities of its people, not the rules of foreign economists. Ghana proved that. It didn't wait for permission to rise. It just did. And in doing so, it exposed the truth. Sovereignty is not ceremonial. It's economic. It's about deciding how you tax your people, how you spend your budget, and who gets to dictate the rules. That's why Ghana is being punished for succeeding. That's why Egypt, in collapse but compliant, is still praised. Because this isn't about success. It's about obedience. The global financial system isn't interested in building strong, independent African nations. It's interested in controlling them. So now the continent faces a choice. Will Africa continue to accept these invisible chains, policies dressed up as reforms, loans dressed up as assistance, and debt dressed up as development? Or will it follow Ghana, defy the gatekeepers, reject the prescriptions, and walk its own road to prosperity? Ghana has broken the spell. The illusion has cracked. And the question now is not whether Africa can rise. The question is, who's next? What do you think? If Ghana's currency is rising and its people are finally getting relief, why is the IMF so angry instead of supportive? Why is African success treated like a threat by global institutions? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on whether any foreign institution should have the power to dictate how African governments tax, spend, or grow their economies. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.